Welcome back to Swan Signal Live. Sats fans, I'm here with the crew. Shout out to Mara for supporting the show and helping to protect and secure the most secure computer network in the world. That's the Bitcoin network. You can't get in there. It's been 15, 16 years now with the biggest honeypot in the world. You can't get in. Thanks to Mara for securing the Bitcoin network. And I'm here with my boys from Swan. How's it going, fellas? Steven, what's up, man? How was your week?
Good, man. It's never a dull week this year. I'll tell you that. It's the news flow and everything that's happening. It keeps you glued to your, well, not your seat because I walk, but you pay a lot of attention.
Indeed, John. What's happening, man?
What's up, guys? Yeah, definitely no shortage of things to talk about for any of the baseball fans out there. This shirt was very strategic today. Mets just re-signed Pete Alonso to a 2-year, $54 million deal. Let's hope someone's talking to Pete, get him to allocate some of that into Bitcoin. But yeah, the Mets World Series win is all but guaranteed at this point. You heard it here first.
Well, while we're on that, Chiefs. All right, guys, I'm in the Kansas City area. Let's go Chiefs. 3-peat Sunday. You should watch it. Mahomes Magic. Brandon says no, but that's just because he's jelly that his Vikings aren't in the playoffs too often.
Consider me extremely jealous. We had a good run this year and wet the bed in playoffs. So I'm supremely jealous of you guys right now. And just my thought on the macro here is Lennon's quote rings true. It hasn't even been a month in the new administration. It feels like we just went through a decade. I don't know how we're going to keep up this pace, but things are getting crazy out there.
No doubt. Absolutely crazy what's going on in the world. Shake up in Washington. It's got a lot of people kind of up in arms about what's going on. Lots of change happening very quickly. Bitcoin is just as wild as it always is, but especially so during a bull market and during the first presidential administration to support Bitcoin. And both houses of Congress have pro-Bitcoin memberships. And I think it's majorities in both. And this is not just Republicans. This is a bipartisan support for Bitcoin in the nation's capital. So wild times for Bitcoin. Let's actually jump into a couple of things that's happened out of the White House. We'll do an update on the SBR first. We had David Sachs, who is heading up the crypto and AI. He's the crypto AI czar for the administration. So there was a press conference about what the crypto plan is out of his group, and it was 95% of it sort of fluff, a lot of political talk going on, but there was an update toward the end with a question from the press about the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, and here's what David Sachs had to say.
One of the things that the president instructed us to do was to evaluate the idea for a Bitcoin reserve, and so that is one of the things. That's one of the first things we're going to look at as part of the internal working group in the administration. So as soon as we get all that set up, we're still waiting for some cabinet secretaries who are on the working group to get confirmed. So we're still in the very early stages of this, but that's one of the first things we're gonna look at is the feasibility of a Bitcoin reserve. I think the concept of the sovereign wealth fund is a little separate, and you'd have to talk to Secretary Lutnick, or soon to be Secretary Lutnick, about that.
We are going to get into the sovereign wealth fund as well. I've got one more clip from David Marcus, former CEO of PayPal. He also headed up Meta's effort to create a stable coin. What was the name of that coin again?
Libra.
That's right, Libra. So you headed that up, and now he's at Lightspark, working on an infrastructure for payments on top of Bitcoin, really into Lightning.
What does a strategic reserve do in your mind?
Look,
besides push up the price of Bitcoin.
I think, first of all, if you look at the strategic reserves that the U.S. government holds in gold, we're the #1 holder of gold in the world. And if you think of Bitcoin as a better version of gold, digital gold, why not allocate a portion of that reserve or rebalance a portion of that reserve to the better version? And I think there's just a lot more opportunity for growth and appreciation of Bitcoin than gold in the next couple of decades. So I think it's a wise decision.
Taxpayers would pay for this?
I think that if you reallocate from the existing reserve, it doesn't necessarily have to be an increase in tax burden for the American taxpayer.
There has
And that is exactly what the Lummis bill does. It's directing the Treasury to liquidate some of the gold reserves in order to build a Bitcoin reserve, which is the new version of gold, the better version of gold, as Marcus and many other Bitcoin proponents have put it. And I'll just say before we dive into this topic and give some commentary, the executive order about the strategic reserve, or that spoke about it, about crypto and Bitcoin, did say that there's 180 days for the task force to come back with a recommendation about the Bitcoin strategic reserve. So that's the timeline we're talking about. Steven, what's your latest thinking on the SBR? And, has anything changed?
I think there were two really interesting data points on the David Sachs speech that you need to take away. One, he said, the president has instructed us to, it's one of the first things the president has instructed us to look at. So one, you're hearing, this is coming directly from Trump. He is asking about this. He is saying, hey, I want you guys to look into this. So that's a good sign for people that are bullish on the reserve. Second, the language has yet again changed, where it was Bitcoin strategic reserve, and then it was Bitcoin stockpile, and then it was digital asset stockpile in the executive order. And now he not just once, but twice said Bitcoin reserve, Bitcoin strategic reserve. And then on actually another clip later in the, I think it was on CNN or Fox or something, he says it again. So the language has been dialed in to saying Bitcoin reserve, not digital asset stockpile. So that's a nice shift as kind of onlookers and people that are watching this with a lot of attention. I like to see that. And I think you're also looking at it like it's a priority. It's one of the first things. It's coming from the top. It's the Bitcoin reserve. So I think all else equal, that press conference gets you more bullish. There is going to be an outcome here. And it'll be interesting to talk about it in the context of the Sovereign Wealth Fund. I was, early to say, oh, well, the Sovereign Wealth Fund provided a new avenue that you could do Bitcoin things. And that's, of course, true. But seeing Sachs come out after that and say Bitcoin strategic reserve, well, if they have a designated Bitcoin strategic reserve, they're probably not going to use the Sovereign Wealth Fund to that. Maybe they might, maybe mining, maybe if there's like an energy mining thing, but it's probably going to be focused on that.
John, anything new on the BSR front in your mind?
Yeah, all good points from Steven. I think the only thing I would add is that for me, what all this stuff highlights is that there's multiple paths here. It's not just this binary outcome of like, we get this strategic Bitcoin reserve, it's got to look exactly like this, or we get nothing. They're talking about the reserve. You saw that David Sachs said there's this concept of a wealth fund, and he considers them to be two different things. So, you can get an outcome in one or the other, or like Steven said, potentially both in some unique scenarios. They talked about, David Marcus talked about selling some of the gold, rotating the existing reserve into Bitcoin. Like that's another potential outcome. And then again, I might sound like a broken record here, but there's 200,000 Bitcoin that the US government owns already. So like that to me is the easiest outcome here, is that they just find a way to say, hey, we hold 200,000 Bitcoin already. We're going to hold most of this. And whether we call it a sovereign wealth fund or strategic Bitcoin reserve, they'll figure it out. But that's the takeaway for me, is that there's a lot of potential outcomes here. It's not just like we're hanging our hat on one thing.
Yeah. So it sounded like you may be thinking that we're going to get either or, the wealth fund or the BSR. Is that what you're saying?
To be honest, I haven't really thought about it a ton, but I think Steven's take is an interesting one, which is probably the first assumption would be it's an either or. But sovereign wealth funds are often tied to like longer term strategic assets. And yeah, if the US does say, we're getting into mining because it's strategic for us for some reason, good use of energy, et cetera, maybe that, goes toward the sovereign wealth fund. That's actually pretty reasonable to me.
Yeah, I'm on team both. They're just two different things. One is holding Bitcoin directly. The other one would most likely, like Norway, which we can look at here in a minute, but Norway doesn't hold Bitcoin directly. They have indirect exposure to Bitcoin through MicroStrategy and some miners and Metaplanet. They actually hold Metaplanet. And so through those equities, and sovereign wealth funds will tend to hold fixed income assets or equities, et cetera, but not like these commodities directly. So I think they're two different things in my view. That's where I'm coming from. Brandon, any thoughts?
My main takeaway here is that the fact that there's so many angles and there's so many people talking about potential paths, and the whole administration owns and is supportive of Bitcoin, I do believe they're going to do something here, but I don't have any up-to-date changes in my predictions on is it a BSR here, there, the other thing. I just see optimism across the board, and I think they'll do something.
Yeah, I think coming out of the press conference was pretty bullish, and I noted the same thing, Steven, that the Bitcoin strategic reserve was used in any case that was referring to the reserve. There was no mention of digital asset reserve. So in my mind, the EO was written in that way in order to leave those options on the table. But it seems that Sachs is of the opinion that Bitcoin is really the only digital asset, quote unquote, that rises to the level of the United States holding it in a strategic reserve, which is correct. And Brad Garlinghouse can go home and watch the Chiefs win the Super Bowl.
One comment. Oh, go ahead, Steven.
Just real quick on the second kind of clip with Marcus. Also, something that was interesting is like the host is asking this question about like, are the taxpayers going to pay for it? And that's kind of an interesting question. Because if I borrow 500K to buy from a bank and I buy a house that's worth 500K, did I pay for it? There's an asset of 500K and there's a liability of 500K. Is there a net outlay? I don't think so, right? And so it's a funny thing that even if we wanted to sell $500 billion of treasuries and then we buy $500 billion of Bitcoin, you know, it's you know, there's some level you can say that like we're paying for it, but there's another way that the liability, the debt is being offset by an asset. So I don't know.
I don't know. One quick comment I was going to make here on the BSR, and are we going to get things that aren't Bitcoin in some sort of reserve? And I think what's interesting now more than ever in history is that being loud on Twitter actually matters. I think that Sachs, for sure, Trump and Elon, probably the lesser names in their cabinet, I think they're all very aware of sentiment on Twitter. And this, I don't think, has ever been true in the past. And so we should continue to be loud. And I think policy will blow in the wind a little bit based on sentiment there. So I think that's, I don't know if that's good, but I think it's true.
Yeah, and some people watching may have seen, and speaking of being loud on Twitter, the XRP Army, which is just infamous for coming out and you know, trolling effectively conversations, especially Bitcoiners who they seem to hate, and they think Bitcoin is some antiquated technology that could never scale to serve the world. However, they were out this week, like I mentioned, Brad Garlinghouse, who actually went to the University of Kansas, as did I, and has spent time in this area. I don't know if he's from here. He met with the president or Elon or somebody associated with the administration about, you know, who knows what they're talking about, ostensibly, you know, representing Ripple as, you know, worthy of being part of this digital asset reserve, etc. And yeah, the XRP Army was out. This thing, just, you know, public service announcement, Ripple is a scam. XRP is a scam, has been for a long time. Please come and raid the tweet that this stream is on Twitter right now, and let us know that we're being ridiculous. That I lashed out at them this week. It's one of my favorite pastimes on Bitcoin Twitter, and yeah, you can get into it, but just take a look if you're thinking or about buying into Ripple or tempted to, or they do seem convincing at times. You know, take a deeper look at it. It is not what it seems.
Did you guys see the survey? I only glanced at it quickly. Tristan Tate, which I don't really follow those guys. Is he related to Andrew Tate? Presumably, I don't know. Put out a survey of like which, what was even the question? Which one's going to hit an all-time high next? So basically like, which are you most bullish on? And the one that got the most votes, and it was like thousands of votes, was XRP. Makes you wonder, like, is it a bunch of bot accounts voting? I don't know if they could pull that off. But when I saw the results of the survey, I was just like, wow, was not expecting XRP to be that big of a number one answer there.
Yep.
Quick orientation for the XRP army out there. XRP would need to 8x from here while Bitcoin stays flat to regain your 2020 or 2017 all-time high against Bitcoin. So as per usual, everything goes down against Bitcoin over time. You're nowhere near your all-time high. Good luck.
Maybe this is a good segue into this chart that Steven posted this week.
Take us through it, Steven. I want to hear your explanation.
So this is actually a famous image. Like, all the crypto people will recognize this image, and it's supposed to kind of show the path of a crypto after the initial pump, right? You think of this as like an asset price. And so you have this giant parabolic run up that happens in these cryptos. And then it kind of gets, like, every time it goes up, those are those circles. It like pumps again, it gets sold off, pumps again, each time less and less and less and less. And so, interestingly enough, this is what a lot of altcoin charts look like against Bitcoin. We were just talking about this. Like, put this over any of the altcoins denominated in BTC and you'll see it. But my point here wasn't that. My point here is actually, I'm coming to the view that I think the concept of like altcoins and alt season and this stuff got really popular in 2017, because in 2017, it really was this wild thing.
I was buying them in 2017.
Sure. Absolutely. And it was like, you could have thrown darts at a board and it's up 20x in a week, right? The people that kind of knew what they were doing and they sold at the right time ostensibly did very well. And so then Bitcoin has this 4-year cycle, right? Everyone's like, oh, they talk about Bitcoin. They talk about Bitcoin cycles. Bitcoin's going to go up again. It's going to do it again. It's going to do it again. And it has done it. And it's continued to make new all-time highs, and it's continued to grow. And so then this kind of assumption that the altcoins are going to keep doing what happened in 2017 every time. That's what most crypto traders believe. And I think what we're starting to see, in the same way that, like, if you have this kind of nonsense coin that pumps a ton, once it pumps again, even 25% as much, the bag holders are going to sell it down. And so it never, ever gets as high again. And I think we're seeing something like that with the entire crypto complex, where you're never again going to have the sort of speculative interest that you had in 2017, where literally everyone believed that this was like a real innovation. These were like fundamental business model changes, fundamental technology breaks through, and it allowed people to just pile money in from a broad new audience. And so what you're seeing with that chart going increasingly lower, it is increasingly a smaller number of people moving the same funds around to market and getting less and less result for it. Where this comes from is a lot of the crypto traders are miserable right now, because a lot of these, like, Brady, maybe you could pull up like Fartcoin or A16Z. These are like popular meme coins. And when you see these charts,
I don't even know where to find these.
Yeah, you gotta or whatever. Yeah, CoinGecko. And they're devastating. I mean, these things are down like 80%. Like, Bitcoin has had like an 8% or a 10% correction, and these charts are down 80%, 90%. They're completely wiped out. And so everybody is like scratching their head and they're miserable. Meanwhile, Bitcoin is like inches from an all-time high, still very strong, and a million reasons to be very optimistic about it going forward. And so I really do think we're living in the true bifurcation of, Bitcoin and the crypto market. So, I mean, these are massive drops. Like, this chart even, doesn't make it look as big, but it basically erased everything that it did, because it doesn't really have a history before like October. And so just, people were buying it above $2 and it's now 40 cents or something like that. I mean, just wiped out, absolutely wiped out.
And the trend is obvious. Yeah. And this is not against Bitcoin. This is against the dollar. The chart would look even more pathetic against Bitcoin.
Oh yeah, that's just USD. Yeah.
Yep.
If you ask these people who are in whatever altcoin or meme coin 3 months ago and just said, hey, or however many months ago, before when Bitcoin was like 60s, right? Chopping around the 60, 70K range. And he said, hey, Bitcoin goes to 100K. What do you think your favorite altcoin or meme coin does? Like, they would have all given you such super bullish answers. So I think they're dealing with a huge dose of reality right now.
Think about the 2017 class of altcoins, especially. Those shitcoins were like Steven was saying, promising all this tech. Like Cardano is a great example. So in 2017, I got in early 2017. Got in because of Bitcoin, Andreas Antonopoulos videos and all of that, and I was totally bought in. And then I got sucked in to all of the marketing of like, okay, Bitcoin is outdated, it's antiquated. We're doing all these cool new things, and here all these promises. And Cardano was a great example because they sort of played all these academic games. Here's all these white papers and all this research and these really smart mathematicians and these equations that you had to try to parse. And, here's what this is going to do and that. And they were really good at marketing to people who, were looking for some evidence that there's truth behind these claims, right? They were really good at the smoke and mirrors, and still are to this day. Cardano's done nothing. There's no utility. People are still good at swindling people out of their money. So those were scams, right? Almost all of those were scams. They were just lying to people. The meme coin thing is interesting because it's just like, this is gambling. Like they're not promising any utility. They're not saying that it's better than Bitcoin. They're just saying, whatever, which meme is going to go up, which meme is going to go down, or maybe you want to own it for some sentimental reason. I don't know. But at least they're not lying to you. So to me, that's more like gambling than it is scamming. But in any case, I think it's clear at this point to most people and more people in the mainstream media and just kind of in the mainstream itself, like there's a difference between Bitcoin and crypto. And that's why almost every morning on the Swan account, we tweet Bitcoin, not crypto. There's a difference here between those things. And I think that's pretty clear. Bitcoin's a serious global asset at this point, playing on the global financial stage, and has a shot at being sound money for the world, a sound money alternative for the world, a real alternative to fiat money. And you can't say that about any of these other coins at all, meme coins or shit coins, whatever. So
I think honestly, the meme coin thing is part of the same exhaustion where you go from like, this is real promising tech in 2017. And it's just downhill since then till all you're left with is, well, we can create a new way to gamble. We can do meme coins. I think the high point for crypto, like the absolute peak, was the DeFi stuff in 2019. I think that was like the moment that like maybe they were onto something. Maybe they made something that'd be useful. It was actually like novel financial infrastructure. And then when that ended up just turning out to be, yeah, but the only thing you can trade on it is tokens, and the tokens only have value because they let you trade tokens. It was kind of game over, and it's just been kind of a downhill slide. Like they did the NFT thing, those got wiped out. They're doing the meme coin thing, those are getting wiped out even faster than the NFTs did. And meanwhile, Bitcoin's having global institutional sovereign adoption.
Exactly.
Quick point here to stir the pot a little bit. I agree with your guys' position, but I'm going to take the opposite position. All the Ethereum similar, they needed a narrative to sell us some hype because there was really no goods they could deliver on through the whole process. NFTs was the other one, and they'll all have little niches. But then you have people like Larry Fink and others with power and influence now who believe that we're going to tokenize the stock market. Same with Trump's World Liberty Reserve, whatever that scammy looking thing is. But people are trying to bring this back in the equation. So my question is, are we sure we're not in the trough of disillusionment of that kind of stuff, and that we were too early and so everything failed, but then we're going to try and rebuild it through like a BlackRock or something like that? So that's my one question. Going back to the previous point, I think AI took a lot of wind out of crypto tech sales. I think the massive dilution in the ability to create new coins took away some energy. The MicroStrategy, LBE, and other tools to gamble, along with meme coins. Like there's just exhaustion, I think is probably the right word there. But let's go back to the trough of disillusionment. Is Larry Fink going to rebuild the crypto dream?
Yeah. So I think, and then to be totally fair, okay, what worked? Stable coins worked, right? They did, like, that is, you can't say that wasn't successful. It is a huge successful idea. And that was part of that press conference that we started talking about, is the US is going to do a bunch of stablecoin things. And what are they going to do? They're going to drive down the long end of bond yields with it. So, I mean, that's something. Okay, you got that. And yeah, maybe if Larry Fink does some sort of like the asset tokenization thing is funny, because does it happen? Probably. But are those assets going to trade on like private blockchains? Like also probably. Like I'm not convinced that on an infrastructure level, even what BlackRock wants to do with these things, I don't know how it works, you know? I mean, and, you know, maybe they end up doing it. So maybe you get some sort of asset tokenization thing out of it. But I don't think that's enough to reignite the sort of crypto speculation that everyone wants to see out of this space. It's like, because most of the value is going to accrue to the assets that are being put there, the Apple stock, the Google stock, the real estate holdings. And so, yeah, maybe you get some incremental layer one usage out of the chain or whatever. But I think, you know, for this stuff to continue, you need some sort of actual thing to happen. I think people have waited almost a decade now for something to come out of this. And I don't know that it has outside of stablecoins.
I agree. The ETH bros think that all the value accrues to them in that scenario, when in fact it does not. And I think Larry Fink's selling it as like financial inclusion. Hey, we can export our capital markets to the globe, and anyone with a smartphone can buy Apple stock or whatever. That's how he's selling it. And I'm sure he takes a spread on that. But the idea that would be on a public blockchain seems unrealistic.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Good luck, trench warriors. You are going to need it.
Yeah.
We can go into that CMS Holdings thread real quick, since we're talking about market cycles.
Sure.
If you want, Brandon. The one thing that we talked about in the chat was we haven't seen an all-time high yet this cycle for Solana and Ethereum, I think, right? Against Bitcoin. Is that true? Or US dollar? Or was it US dollar?
Even maybe Solana, Ethereum is under all-time high, even US dollar.
Right.
Correct. Yeah, Ethereum's way
didn't hit any new all-time high. Maybe just eked it out. You could maybe eke one out with staking. Sol recovered, but also barely eking out an all-time high on a couple wicks.
Yeah, it was like super momentary.
With staking. Yeah.
It's been a very different market compared to these previous ones. Like if you've been in Bitcoin, you're happy. You know, you're feeling good right now. You've done well. And I think the vast majority of people just who are not holding big Bitcoin positions through this, there's a lot of there's just been a lot of losses and a lot of underperformance.
Good call out from Hurley here before we move on to before we move away from crypto and blockchain stuff. But he just pointed out how Larry Fink was like the voice of ESG for multiple years, which he was, and he pivoted away from that. And you know, so just like you see here on the screen, Hurley says he will do the same, pivot away with the whole put everything on a blockchain nonsense. I think that is very possible, Hurley.
You know, I could,
He's
you
a
know,
businessman.
and I could take the other side of it too, like kind of what Brandon was saying, like making it so anybody can access a share of Apple stock or Google stock with a click of a button is like, that's good. That's good. Like if you're in a third world country and like, sure, you can buy Bitcoin, I get it, but like, you know, having more access to global financial markets is a good thing. Like that is a good thing. The question is like, how do you do that? What does that actually look like? In my opinion, like BlackRock runs a consortium blockchain where they tokenize.
Yeah, it'll be something kind of like Liquid. And the intention behind Liquid was one of the intentions was to support digital securities, and it's like a federation of 15 companies. I think it's 17 actually, companies that verify the blockchain. And so it's not fully decentralized like Bitcoin is, but there's a federated decentralization. Sure. And that's, if there's going to be digital assets like digital equities, that's how it would operate. Something like Liquid.
And that's my guess. Like, I think there will be, and I'll go even a step further and say, I think it's a good thing. I think making equities easier to access and trade is just an aggregate good. But I don't think, like going back to our previous, I don't think that value accrual is to these layer ones. I don't think these layer ones are who captures that. And that's kind of the rub there.
It just blows out the PE ratios further for big tech, and it brings more capital to America, I think. But how are they going to get through securities law? Like, how are they going to KYC Zimbabwe, go over?
Well, Elon Musk is working on that, Brandon, because the SEC is going to fire 80% of its workforce. You would need security laws changes,
You're not wrong.
And and that might be a good thing. Like, Saylor was kind of talking about this. You can read into what he's been saying and writing about digital assets and these things. And a huge part of that for him is basically making it 100x easier and cheaper to issue a security. And there's going to be pros and cons with that. But I mean, I think it's something, we know pretty well. It is incredibly expensive and cumbersome to try to issue a public market security. Like, it's hard. It requires millions of dollars. It requires endless auditors and costs. And so on one hand, sure, you prevent some level of fraud and things, but there's so much fraud in public stock markets. There's so many penny stocks. There's so many, like, you certainly don't prevent it all. And the flip side and the cost to that is if you have a business, if you have a company and you don't want to spend 5 million plus getting to the public market, you don't get to play. And so, if you could make issuing a security 100 times faster, 100 times easier, then cool. I mean, that's interesting. Probably good.
Shout out Hurley, by the way. Just go to the YouTube channel and watch Hurley's videos. The guy's a master. He does deep research, condenses it. So shout out Hurley.
People are loving Hurley's videos. Pure Bitcoin Signal on the Swan YouTube channel. It's the other big show on this channel, but it's bigger than ours. And he just crushes it twice a week. So check that out. If you're not subscribed, hit subscribe right now so you can get some great Bitcoin content. And just check out the actual channel homepage. There is a ton of great content there. We've got an entire, like a course, 6-10 minute videos, introduction to Bitcoin. You can just send your friends and family that first video, and Natalie Brunell hosts it, and help orange pill your friends and family. There's some great films in there. So definitely subscribe to the Swan YouTube channel if you're not already. Thanks for the shill, Brandon. The lead into the shill.
Honest shill.
Yeah.
I'm a fan.
Absolutely. So what else?
We've got a ton of kind of macro stuff. Besant, treasury yields. You guys want to hop into that?
Yeah, let's talk about the treasury yield stuff. I think I've got something here. Yeah. All right. So this one here. Besant says Trump wants lower 10-year yields and not Fed cuts. Would love to hear what you guys have to say about this. Let's start with John.
Yeah, so I think there was one particular quote that a couple quotes that I think are kind of emblematic of where Besant's head is at. So one was, he said he's referring to Trump. He wants lower rates. He is not calling for the Fed to lower rates, Besant said. Trump believes that if we deregulate the economy, if we get this tax bill done, if we get energy down, then rates will take care of themselves and the dollar will take care of itself. Just a little bit more. We cut the spending, we cut the size of government, we get more efficiency in the government. We're going to get into a good interest rate cycle. So I think that's interesting for a few reasons. One is because in the first term, Trump was pretty vocal. I believe, if my memory is correct, he's just outright tweeting, Jerome Powell should reduce interest rates now in like all caps and an exclamation point. It doesn't seem like he's going to be doing that this time. It seems like the fiscal side is going to take, more of the wheel here. And that's what Besant seems to be saying now. But again, I would just, think about Trump's incentives here. This is someone who wants to see more investment in the United States. He is a career real estate developer and investor. He wants to see the stock market be higher on a longer term time horizon, not on any given 7-day period. And generally speaking, when the 10 years coming down, that makes all of those things a lot easier to accomplish.
Yeah. It's going to your first point, which I think is really the interesting angle here. It's a bit of a power reposition from the Fed to the fiscal authority. And there's some people that have said, you know, the Fed's dead. The Fed has been dead for a while. They've had vanishingly little control. And one way to look at this is you could see that like Besant and Trump got in there and they realized, you know what, the Fed really isn't going to manage this for us. It doesn't really matter. And so we're just going to take the monetary reins and we're going to manage it through statecraft and through energy policy. We're going to unleash energy to bring down the short-term interest rates and bring down the dollar. And we're going to do the stablecoins bill, and we're going to do these kind of other tactics to bring down the 10-year. And it's an interesting, I mean, it looks like what they're after is DXY down, the dollar cheaper, and the 10-year down. And if they can pull that off, I mean, that's kind of the holy grail for them. And it's good for Bitcoin. It's good for risk assets. It's good for America. It's good for, you know, kind of reshoring industrial jobs and manufacturing. So, you know, in my head, more power to them. I think I would love to see DXY $15 lower. And I would love to see the 10-year at half of what it is.
Explain what the DXY is.
So dollar index. So just like the strength of the dollar relative to other currencies. And this is one of the big problems we have as a nation. Triffin's dilemma is that when the dollar trades so much stronger, which it does, than all other currencies, it is completely ineffective for us to export goods. We can't really sell goods to other countries because them converting from their currency to our currency, it's like a tariff. It's like a huge tariff that's in place. Like the function of the dollar as is, you know, effectively works that way. They're just different ways of taxing trade between countries.
There's a really good graphic on this. I just sent it in our chat, Brady. I don't know if that's too annoying to bring up, but I can talk through it either way. Charlie Bolello, if you guys are familiar with him, he puts out some really good graphics on markets, and it shows the 10-year, it's basically fiat performance of the dollar relative to other fiat currencies out there. And he posted it last January, but the point still stands. Like the dollar has outperformed basically every single fiat currency except the Swiss franc on a 10-year time frame. And that, you know, you might ask yourself, why do so many entities around the world hold dollars? And the answer is because of that persistent dollar overvaluation. Like you're gonna, yeah, here it is, perfect. All of that red, that is other fiat currencies losing significant value against the dollar over 10 years. This is why, like, if you're going to hold one of these other currencies, you're going to end up losing a ton of value over 10 years. So you end up holding the dollar or, you know, treasuries that is $1 plus it pays you some yield. Maybe this is a good segue to talk about this guy, Steven Moran, who's Trump's chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors. He put out a paper that's literally titled, you were quick, Brady, nicely done, A User's Guide to Restructuring the Global Trading System. I mean, it's a 41-page paper where he's basically outlined, like, this is huge. I haven't read through the whole thing yet. I'm still getting through it. But if anyone wants weekend reading, like, would highly recommend this. And I'm not saying just because he wrote this paper means he's going to do it. On the flip side, we have to remember that people like Trump and others have been talking about bringing back U.S. manufacturing jobs and all the problems with imbalanced trade. Like, people have been talking about this for a long time, and things have not necessarily been done about it. But maybe this is the 4-year period where they're going to make some changes to the monetary system and the global trading system that they have been talking about for a long time. So he specifically talks, you could see in that second section, the root of the economic imbalances lies in persistent dollar overvaluation. And that's exactly the chart that we just showed you guys, that the dollar basically outperforms every other fiat currency. So that kind of, just adds some color to what we're talking about here. I don't want to go too deep on this paper because it's a 41-page paper and that would take, a while, but just wanted to flag that to everyone.
There's a lot of this going on. It reminds me also of Matthew Pine's report for Scott Besson. There's this phrase that keeps getting thrown around. It's restructuring global trade, reordering global trade. What does it mean? And like, that's what you're seeing out of the Trump administration, is they're looking at the balance of global trade, the currency dynamics, the way the US has agreements and services that we provide for other countries. And all of these things are suddenly back on the table. Should we do this? Should we do, like, it's really what you're seeing. Oh, I wanted to say this earlier. I really think you're seeing some players in the White House that are just seeing, and the administration, what they can do. They're pulling levers. Which levers work? Does this lever work? Does it, or is it rusted? Is it ineffective? Can I do this? Can I do that? And I think like the underlying view here is, what ability do we have to restructure these relationships? And I think there's a lot that's being tried. Tariffs are being thrown around. Are they real? Are they negotiating tactics? Are we getting rid of income tax? Are we not getting rid of income tax? Can we get more of our revenue from foreign trading partners? Can we lower domestic costs? Like, we're going to see, like, these, can we lower spending? Can we cut spending? Is there a bunch of waste? What waste can we find? It's very much just looking at all the options and seeing what's possible. And I think, over the next 6 months, we'll see, it'll become more concrete, and we'll see, is it feasible? Is it not feasible? Are we able to restructure these trading relationships? I think the answer will be yes, to a large degree. It doesn't mean everything that everyone wants to accomplish will be accomplished. It doesn't mean that everything will be good even. But I do think that directionally it is correct that, there are a lot of agreements in place, and there's a lot of systems in place that effectively tax the US and export the proceeds to the rest. That's Triffin's dilemma in a nutshell. And I think it's not just Triffin's dilemma on the currency system. There's many other ways that this takes place. And I think, I'm not saying that right number should be zero. It's probably a decent thing that the US, as the richest and most powerful country, makes sure people don't starve sometimes, or steps in for some disaster relief in Haiti or those sort of things, right? Like, I'm not saying that number should be zero and there should be nothing that we're doing for the world. But I think it's also the case that I think a lot of these things are structurally misaligned, and it'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
How do you guys think that this initiative by Trump to reduce fiscal spending, how successful can he be at that? Lynn Alden always talks about nothing stops this train. Something like 70% of the federal budget is just, you can't cut it. It's Medicare, Medicaid, it's military and defense spending. These are like the top 3 or 4. Then, of course, interest payments is a huge part of federal spending, the budget. Is there enough actual cuttable fat, right? To significantly reduce fiscal spending to the point that it will have some kind of real impact in combination with some of these other strategies?
So it's an interesting question, right? Because no, there's not. Unless you had some miracle, you can't reduce it enough to get out of the problem we're in, right? There's too much Social Security, Medicare, military. These are massive obligations. Even if you cut all the fat, even if you raised, 10% universal tariffs, you're still not getting out of that debt.
It's just, the train is just running so fast at this point. And it's really the interest payments that are ballooning so much, that are moving up as the top expense categories for the U.S. budget.
However, that being said, that doesn't mean there isn't virtue in trying to make it better, right? It doesn't mean that the right response is if we can't ultimately stop the unwind of this monetary system, then we should just throw our hands up. You know what I mean?
I agree with that.
Yeah, and there may be a real world where they're able, between lowering rates on the long end, cutting spending, and raising additional revenues, they could reduce the speed that that deficit is growing by a material amount. Like, that is also possible. They won't stop it. They won't prevent this dynamic, but they could really slow it down.
And there's something to be said about just a mind shift change about how we approach government. Even if it's not, incredibly materially successful in reducing deficits, just trying, does make a difference.
Yeah, I think Quidam might want to say something about that mindset shift and how we approach government. But I'll just say quickly, even like you look at what some of the big players have said, Besson and others. There's not a direct quote, but what I've seen them say is like, we're spending 7% on 7% is the deficit as a percentage of GDP right now. We're not in a recession based on how they calculate recession. So that's a big deficit that we have right now. A lot of them, when they talk about cutting it, they're like, yeah, we want to get it back down to like the 3% range. But that's still a deficit, by definition. Like, you're still adding to the debt. They're basically talking about adding to the debt more slowly. It's kind of like the joke about inflation. They're like, we want inflation to come down. Like, oh, you mean prices actually going back to where they were? They're like, whoa, no, not that. We just want it to increase more slowly. So that's, I think, kind of what's being talked about. I don't think there's anyone in a position of power that's really predicting that they're going to like balance the budget and start having surpluses anytime soon.
Yeah. It's not going to happen, but I think being responsible stewards, and it's also like, here's the thing, as you're making these moves, you can also start planning for the next system. Like the event horizon that's being talked about here is a restructuring of the monetary system. It's not that the US dies and disappears. It's that the actual like currency and debt system goes through some sort of restructuring, which has happened many times in the past. It happened at the end of World War II. It happened with Nixon, right? It's not the end, it's the start of something new. And so as you're kind of managing this, you can also start planting the seeds for the next monetary order. And that's maybe some of what, it's an interesting angle you could argue, is this sovereign wealth fund discussion that has been floated around. Maybe it's a stretch and maybe they're not planning in that way. But one argument you could make for it is that it puts the US in a better position for the inevitable long-term end of the current dollar system.
And I would say, is it the end? I don't know, but I think the sovereign wealth fund particularly buys optionality in the future, right? We're going into a period of uncertainty. Will there be a new global reserve currency, changing world order, a la Dalio type thing? Or can the US buy itself another century of winning here? And I think you have to be prepared for both of those two outcomes. But when I see the sovereign wealth fund, I am optimistic on this path in some way. Part of it scares me. So the two angles I see are either we have natural resources that the federal government owns that we're not monetizing, bullish on that, and also like abusing our economic power, sort of like positioning in the market to own equity upside. Like, for example, in TikTok, we negotiated a deal. Now we own TikTok. Now we own a part of pharma because we're buying all the vaccines. So you might as well give us a piece. I hate that path. Sure, it makes sense dollars and cents wise. If we're a business, great, we can probably get those deals done. However, what type of incentives does that create when our government owns upside in Pfizer and then they have an incentive to push a product, or they own TikTok and they have an incentive to do something with China? Those are weird incentives I like to throw away. But I would like to go in a little bit deeper into monetizing natural resources. Lutnick has explained a lot about his vision here. Obviously, the guy owns hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. He said trillions soon. And his point of view is that we have these natural resources not being monetized. Okay, what does that actually mean? A ton of different things, but let's look at Norway as an example. So most people think about Norway as an oil nation, right? They found some oil. However, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, Norway was already making moves like this. And Norway is a very mountainous country, so they have a lot of potential hydro energy. And in the early 1900s, Norway is looking around saying we need more energy, except we don't have enough capital to build out these huge capital projects. So they sold leases on their land to private enterprise. Private enterprise comes in, they unload cash, they build this huge hydro all over the country. And they get 50 years, 70 years, I don't know the numbers, but they get a really long lease. So they get paid fully on that investment. At the end of the long lease, all the hydro gets nationalized back to the state. And so they monetize their natural resources. Now they have state-owned hydro to sell to their citizens for a long time. So that's a massive win. Then in the 60s and 70s, they discovered offshore oil in the North Sea. Very interesting story there. I recommend looking that one up if you're a history nerd like I am. But there was controversy over, does Denmark get the oil? Does Great Britain get the oil? Does Norway get the oil? And it came down to, how do you draw the map in the middle of the North Sea between those two countries? And it's very fascinating. So I recommend looking that up. But if we take that same example to the US, what if we sell mineral rights leases to private companies all over? Does this all of a sudden generate a bunch of income that doesn't really have too much downside? And I think the answer is yes. And then what do we do with that money? Well, it buys us optionality at a minimum. I think Norway has like 300,000, I want to say, dollars per citizen there sitting in their sovereign wealth fund. That's pretty cool. We're underwater on all of our citizens, and we're going negative increasingly so every single year. And so I'm very supportive of that.
There's some info on Norway's sovereign wealth fund, which is well established. And I think it was dropped last week or a couple weeks ago that they now have exposure to the equivalent of 3,400 or so Bitcoin through investments, equity investments in, or I don't know if I wouldn't say it's an equity investment necessarily, but yeah, equity investments in MicroStrategy, a couple of miners, Metaplanet, etc. So
yes, sir, this is very exciting. Okay. We're going to.
Sorry, to set this up real quick, this is Trump signing the order for the Sovereign Wealth Fund. On the left, you see Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent, and on the right is Howard Lutnick, Secretary, or soon to be Secretary of what's his department again? I can't remember.
Lutnick?
Yeah.
Lutnick is Commerce, head of
right. Thank you.
Secretary of Commerce.
I think he's still in confirmations, but anyway, here they are talking about
within the next 12 months, we're going to monetize the asset side of the U.S. balance sheet for the American people. We're going to put the assets to work, and I think it's going to be very exciting. We're going to study best practices as done around the world. It'll be a combination of liquid assets, assets that we have in this country as we work to bring them out for the American people.
The extraordinary size and scale of the U.S. government and the business it does with companies should create value for American citizens. If we are going to buy 2 billion COVID vaccines, maybe we should have some warrants and some equity in these companies and have that grow for the help of the American people. So I bring all these things together, I think we'll create, Scott and I will create an amazing sovereign wealth fund for you, sir.
So other countries have sovereign wealth funds, and they're much smaller countries, and they're not the United States. We have tremendous potential in this country, tremendous. You're seeing that, what's happened just in a short period of time. And as an example, TikTok, we're going to be doing something perhaps with TikTok, and perhaps not. If we make the right deal, we'll do it, otherwise we won't. But I have the right to do that, and we might put that in the sovereign wealth fund, whatever we make, or if we do a partnership with very wealthy people, a lot of options, but we could put that as an example in the fund, and we have a lot of other things that we could.
Fascinating couple of things there. One, how does Lutnick pull out this third rail vaccine example, which is, that was very interesting. And then also, talking about TikTok, which I think is another kind of third rail at this point, really very controversial thing. Anyway, those are just two interesting, just coming from a communications perspective. Those are interesting choices. Any other thoughts on sovereign wealth fund? I know John has a couple of things for us to finish up on.
Yeah, I think that one tells the story for that topic. That's kind of just gives more context to what Quidam was talking about there. Should we move to the couple quick hits that we wanted to talk about, Brady?
Yeah, let's do the check capital gains real quick.
Yeah, so this is just another headline. We've highlighted some of these. Back in October, Italy had an announcement that said they were going to do some sort of special elevated tax on Bitcoin holders. But then you saw other countries. There was another European country recently that said there would be no capital gains tax on Bitcoin. And now the Czech Republic is coming out and saying if you hold it for 3 years, then there's no capital gains tax on Bitcoin. And some Bitcoiners out there love this one even more because it was like a forced 3-year hodl and then, no capital gains tax. But this one, we've talked about it before, but we're going to highlight it every time there's a headline. This is part of the story of different countries having different treatment of Bitcoin. And I think it's only going to get bigger as Bitcoin grows in market cap, it grows in adoption. Different countries are going to compete for that base of people who want this. So just stay tuned for more headlines like that.
Global geopolitical game theory in Bitcoin, competing to get people who are living on Bitcoin, living with Bitcoin, investing in Bitcoin, and relying on it to preserve their wealth. That's pretty enticing. There's a lot of reasons to stick around where you are, and it has to sort of overcome those. But no capital gains tax on Bitcoin is pretty massive. Hope we'll see it at home.
I think one interesting tie-in here beyond just Bitcoin is that we're seeing a whole bunch of trends converging right now globally, where we have the rise of Wi-Fi everywhere, global connectivity, remote work. We've got golden passports, different countries trying to buy citizens, right? It's all because human capital is intellectual now, and we're all mobile and we can actually pull it off. So there's a global battle for talent, and we have the infrastructure available to make it easier than ever. And I think the Bitcoin cohort is just a really juicy cohort to go after. We're already more mobile. If our wealth's in Bitcoin, you just change one little law and that's enough to get us to move. So I expect all this stuff to continue. And I think The Sovereign Individual, a book written in the late 90s, predicted the convergence of these trends. And now we're almost 20 years later and the pieces are very clearly falling into place. So pretty wild to see that prophecy come through.
Yeah. And then there's the flip side too, where there's just so many reasons to not move anywhere else. Like I don't see me uprooting my family and moving to the Czech Republic because of this law, or El Salvador, etc. Which, there's Bitcoiners who are just going to stay at home and fight the good fight. And let's make it happen here. That's what I'd prefer.
Yeah. There's something CMS holding, Dan, he had this thing. He'd always make fun of the people that moved to Puerto Rico for the no capital gains tax. And I think the way he would do it was pretty brilliant. It was like, oh, you're so rich, you had to pack up everything you own and move to a different country to avoid taxes. That's how rich you are.
Yeah.
You have so much money that you can't live in the country you want to live in.
Right. Yeah. That's a good one. We also have this Reason article to take a quick look at. Here's the headline. The government says money isn't property, so it can take yours. In a jaw-dropping argument, the DOJ claims seizing $50,000 from a small business doesn't violate property rights because money isn't property. John, tell us more about this one.
Yeah, so we'll just go like one layer deeper here. This is from the Reason article. The DOJ gave 3 rationales for their argument, all packed into, this is a great line from Reason, all packed into a doorstopper of a footnote. One is the government creates money, so you can't own it. 2, the government can tax your money, so you don't own it. And 3, the Constitution allows the government to spend money for, quote unquote, the general welfare. That third one really gets me going because there is an extensive set of writing that the founders did on the general welfare clause. And in general, they did not like it because you have to remember what the whole point of the Constitution, it's that it's specific enumerated powers for the federal government. It's the way the government works. I don't know how many, 10th graders could even tell you this now, but if it's in the Constitution explicitly, the federal government can do it. If it's not, it goes to the states. Very simple. But the Reason article referring to the general welfare, if general welfare means you can kind of do anything, then what's the point of the Constitution at all? Call it general welfare. So that's always been like kind of a nonsense argument for, oh, well, the government could do it because of general welfare. I don't know. To me, this sounds like an MMTer wrote this. They're like, oh, the government creates money, so it's not yours. I hope this one falls down in the court system somewhere, but we'll see.
You'll own nothing and you'll be happy.
Yeah, it's essentially a chartalist argument, right? Money is of and by and for the state, and that's what money is. And Bitcoiners completely disagree with that point of view. Bitcoin or money is from the market. And yeah, let the games begin.
Market chosen money is the way to go. And that's not what we have right now. Actually, we do. We have Bitcoin, but not the US dollar. All right, gents. Man, we covered a lot today. I think this was a good rip, good session. Thanks for being here. We will be back next week. Same time, same place. It's 11 a.m. PT, 2 p.m. ET on the Swan Bitcoin YouTube channel and the @Swan handle on Twitter. So join us there. We have a lot of fun in the YouTube chat too. So if you're usually watching over on Twitter, come on over to the YouTube chat. We'll feature some of the better comments and questions and discuss them. So would love to see you all over there. Thanks, gentlemen. Have a great weekend.
Let's go Saquon. I can't say let's go Eagles as a New York sports fan. I kind of despise Philly, but Saquon is such a beast. He's so good. I kind of want to see him win. So I'm rooting for Saquon, not the Eagles, if I can somehow pull that off.
Unprecedented three-peat, Mahomes magic. It's going to happen. It'll be like a 26-26 game. Mahomes will get the ball and drive for a game-winning touchdown with 2 seconds left on the clock. Called it here.
Yeah. The NFL as a business very much likes your narrative there, Brady. As far as I'm concerned, football season ended once the Vikings were knocked out, and it's all about Anthony Edwards season now. Go Wolves.
Oh, yeah. I love the Wolves. Love Ant.
I want to see Bitcoin hit 110.
Yeah, let's go. 90.
All the things we're rooting for.
we touched 100 just for a brief moment this morning, down to 96.5. Yeah, people get worried, man. We're 10K off of the all-time high.
more vol, honestly.
We're
just like
so
one other,
lucky. We're so privileged.
I think we have more vol this year, by the way, just as like a general macro takeaway. The last couple of years have been pretty low vol. Yeah, I think we see more vol in Bitcoin, regular assets for this year and the next.
We've seen also more kind of long periods of consolidation in like the past 18 months too.
Yeah.
Last year was almost all, going between like 55 and 70. Now we seem to be ranging between like, low 90s and upper, 108 and 92, something like that. But yeah, whipsawing is what they like to call it. All right, gents, I'll close this out. Thanks. All right, thanks again for everyone for joining us. This show is brought to you by Swan Bitcoin. Check us out at swan.com. We are a Bitcoin financial services company. You can buy Bitcoin, you can sell Bitcoin. Although we don't recommend it. We generally recommend you buy it and take it out into your own self-custody. We have free withdrawals, always free, to encourage you to take self-custody when you are ready. We also have a collaborative self-custody product called Swan Vault. Extremely easy process to set up. It's the easiest process to set up a multi-sig vault in the industry. So check out Swan Vault for collaborative custody. Swan will care for one key. You'll hold two keys. And if you need to access the backup key, or you need to use your Swan Vault key for a payment or whatever to send Bitcoin, you can do that. Super simple. Highly recommend it. We also have an IRA product. And we also have Swan Private, which Steven heads up. And it is a white glove service for people who are looking to really build generational wealth with Bitcoin. So check out swan.com for more on all of that. And of course, the Swan app is in the App Store. Just search Swan Bitcoin in the App Store. Great app, super fast, buy and sell, set up your IRA, set up your vault straight from the app. So that's what we got going on at Swan. Hope you guys will check us out. We'll be back again with Swan Signal Live next Friday. And in fact, for some people in New York, we'll be doing a live IRL version of Swan Signal next week in New York. So we'll be doing 2 Swan Signals next week. All right, everybody, we'll see you next Friday. Take care.